The back room of Harlan's tavern reeked of bourbon, dust, and dread. Clara's wrists were bound with rough twine, the strands biting into her flesh. Emma huddled beside her, younger, frailer, trembling so fiercely she could barely draw breath. Harlan loomed over them, his lips curling into a vicious smirk. Vance slouched in the corner, toying with a blade, his smile sharp and hungry. 2 men, 2 predators, and no way out. "You can't settle your debt with coin," Harlan snarled, his voice low and menacing. "So you'll settle it with blood." Clara's pulse hammered in her chest. Her throat was parched, her lips cracked from the backhand he'd already dealt her. She glanced at Emma, her sister's eyes wide with terror, glistening with unshed tears, silently begging for salvation. Emma was just 19, far too young for this nightmare. Harlan dragged Clara to her feet, his grip bruising her arm, his breath sour against her ear. "You or her," he hissed. "Pick one." His fingers grazed the twine on Emma's wrist. Emma let out a choked sob, the sound splintering Clara's heart. Clara squeezed her eyes shut, shame pressing down like a stone on her chest. She forced the words out, her voice shaking, fractured. "I'll do it. Just let her go." Her words hung heavy in the dim room. She wasn't stripped bare, not yet, but she felt shattered inside. She'd surrendered her dignity, her body, to shield the only family she had left. Emma cried out, tugging against the twine. "No, Clara, don't! Someone, please, help us!" Her voice broke, echoing through the tavern's flimsy walls. In the front room, Eli Tanner heard it. He'd come for nothing more than a pipe of tobacco and a moment's peace. A man who kept his own counsel, his hair streaked with silver, his back stooped from decades of toil on the plains. But that cry, it wasn't just a sound. It was a ghost from a past he'd buried deep. His daughter had once screamed like that, before the fire, before the earth claimed her. Eli set his glass down. He stood, his boots thudding against the creaky floorboards. The fiddle player stopped mid-tune. The handful of drinkers at the bar glanced up, uneasy. As Eli pushed through the door to the back, the scene froze him in his tracks. Clara, her blouse ripped at the sleeve, her eyes brimming with despair. Emma, bound and weeping, pleading for mercy. Harlan towering over them, his hand clamped on Clara's arm. Vance, grinning, his blade glinting in the faint light. Eli's breath hitched. The room seemed to tilt. For a moment, he wasn't in a tavern, but back in that night 12 years ago, when his daughter had begged for rescue, and he'd been too late. His jaw clenched. His fingers brushed the pistol at his side. Harlan growled when he saw him. "This ain't your concern, old man. Get out." Eli didn't budge, his gaze locked on Clara's, reading the silent plea etched in her face. A woman ready to sacrifice herself, a sister willing to give everything for kin. The air grew thick, electric, poised to break. Eli's heart thudded like a war drum. He'd vowed never again, never to draw, never to kill. But here it was, the same choice, the same question. Would he turn away and let history repeat? Or would Eli Tanner act tonight and alter the fate of 2 broken sisters? Eli stood, unmoving, his eyes fixed on the sisters. The room seemed to hold its breath. Harlan's grip tightened on Clara's arm, his smirk dripping with arrogance. "You heard me, old-timer. Walk away." But Eli stayed rooted. His jaw tightened, his hand inching closer to the pistol at his hip. The rust in his soul cracked, just a fraction. The weight of every choice he'd ever made bore down on him. Clara stared at him, her lips trembling, no sound escaping. She'd given all she had to keep Emma safe. Harlan laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. This one's already offered herself up, said she'd give in. What a noble sister. Maybe I'll take the little one too, just to keep things even. Emma sobbed, kicking at the twine around her ankles. Her voice was raw, desperate. Please, sir, don't let him, please. That cry broke something deep in Eli. It roared through him like a storm. In one fluid motion, his pistol cleared the holster, gleaming under the flickering lantern light. The click of the hammer pulling back rang louder than any shot. Vance froze, his blade half raised. Harlan's smirk wavered, his face twitching with sudden fear. No one in the room doubted the steel in Eli Tanner's stare. "Untie them," Eli said, his voice low, unshaken, carrying more weight than a shout. It wasn't a request, it was a command. For a moment, Harlan hesitated, his eyes flicking between Eli's pistol and Clara's trembling frame. For the first time, his confidence cracked. Folks in this town still whispered about Eli Tanner, the old drifter who never missed his mark. And Harlan wasn't fool enough to test the legend. With a muttered curse, he cut the twine loose. Vance stepped back, his blade clattering to the floor. Clara stumbled forward, her legs weak, pulling Emma into her arms. They clung to each other, shaking, tears streaking their dirt-smudged faces. For the first time that night, a flicker of hope sparked between them. Eli kept his pistol steady. He knew better than to lower it too soon. Men like Harlan only respected the cold promise of iron. Finally, he spoke again, his voice colder still. "Get out, both of you." Harlan spat on the floor, humiliated, but he backed toward the door. Vance followed, his eyes burning with venom. Before vanishing, Harlan hissed, "This ain't done, old man. You'll regret this." The door slammed shut, the sound ringing like a warning. Silence flooded the room. Clara turned to Eli, her voice cracking. "Why'd you help us? You don't even know our names." Eli holstered his gun, his eyes heavy with memories too raw to voice. Instead, he muttered, "Because someone should have saved my daughter, and no one did." Clara blinked, at a loss for words. Emma clung to her sister, whispering through sobs, "Are we safe now?" Eli's gaze hardened. He glanced toward the door, Harlan's threat still echoing. Safe? Not by a long shot. Because Harlan was a coward, but a coward with influence, and men like that never let go. What would happen when he returned, maybe with the law in his pocket? The night outside the tavern was thick with quiet. The sisters held each other, as if letting go would plunge them back into despair. Eli walked beside them, his boots crunching on the gravel path. They reached the edge of town, where his old mare stood tethered to a post. Eli helped Emma up first, her slight frame shivering in the chill. Clara followed, her voice still unsteady. "You didn't have to save us. Now Harlan'll come for you too." Eli gave a slight shake of his head. "I've faced worse than Harlan, and I'm still standing." It was true. His voice carried the weight of years, the scars of a man who'd weathered too many tempests. But, deep down, he knew this storm was far from over. When they reached his homestead, the place looked weathered and worn, but it was a refuge. A lone lantern glowed on the porch, casting shadows across the dry yard. Eli led them inside, poured water into tin mugs, and set out hardtack from a shelf. The sisters ate in silence, too famished to speak. Eli sat across from them, watching, his mind drifting to nights when his own daughter had sat in that same chair. The memory cut deep, but he hid it behind a face like granite. Finally, Clara broke the quiet. "What happens when Harlan comes back?" Eli leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "He'll come. too proud to let this slide. Then he met Clara's gaze. But when he does, he'll find I'm ready. Emma shifted, clutching her mug with both hands. You're saying you'll fight them? You're just one man. Eli let out a dry chuckle, rough like sand. One man with a steady aim and a clean heart can be enough. The sisters exchanged a glance, a spark of trust passing between them for the first time that night. Clara lowered her voice. Why us, Eli? You don't know us. Why risk it all? Eli stared into the lantern's flame, the answer heavy on his tongue. Because I stayed silent too many times, and the people I loved paid for it. Not this time. The room fell still, the kind of quiet that lingers in your bones. And here's where I need you, friends. If you want to know what happens next, if you're ready to see how this fight unfolds when Harlan comes back to settle the score, stick with me. This story's just getting started. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next chapter, 'cause Eli Tanner's battle is far from over. Morning broke over the homestead, the air sharp with a biting chill. The sisters had barely slept, their eyes heavy with fear and uncertainty. Eli was already outside, tending to his mare, moving slow and deliberate, as if the world hadn't turned upside down. Clara stepped onto the porch, pulling her shawl tight. You really think Harlan'll come today? Eli glanced at her, his face unreadable. Harlan's the kind who can't stand being shamed. Men like him always come back. Emma appeared behind her sister, clutching a mug of coffee too big for her hands. Her voice wavered. What if he brings more men? What if he brings the sheriff? Eli paused, staring out over the barren field. The law bends for men like Sheriff Holt. He's been in Harlan's pocket for years. That makes him worse than a bandit. The sisters shared a worried look. They were safe for now, but safety felt fragile, like a threadbare quilt against a bitter wind. Later that morning, Eli saddled his mare and rode into town. He left Clara and Emma at the homestead with firm instructions. Stay inside. Don't open the door. If trouble comes, hide in the storm cellar and stay put. The tavern was alive with tension when Eli walked in. Harlan sat at a table with Vance, and sure enough, Sheriff Holt was there, his badge glinting, his grin as crooked as his morals. Well, look who's here, Harlan drawled, loud enough for the room to hear. The old farmer thinks he's a savior. You paid their debt, did you? Think that makes those girls free? The crowd hushed. Eli kept his voice even, but each word cut like a blade. They're free, and if you touch them again, you'll answer to me. Holt leaned back, tipping his hat with a sneer. You talk bold, Tanner, but you forget. I'm the law here. If Harlan says those girls owe him, they owe him. That's how it works. Eli's eyes locked on Holt's. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was heavy enough to choke the air. Then Eli said, slow and deliberate, Not this time. Not while I'm still breathing. The tavern stirred. Some nodded. Others looked away. But everyone felt it. A storm was brewing. Harlan's grin returned, sharper than ever. Then we'll see who this town belongs to. The line was drawn, clear as daylight. Eli knew the fight was only beginning, but when Harlan and the law came knocking, with the whole town watching, what chance did one old drifter really have? The reckoning came sooner than anyone expected. By noon, dust clouded the horizon, riders approaching fast. Harlan, Vance, and Sheriff Holt led the charge, their faces set with arrogance, hands hovering near their weapons. Eli stood on the porch of his homestead, rifle in hand, shoulders squared against the weight of years. Clara and Emma stood behind him, fear in their eyes, but also resolve. They were done running. They were ready to stand. Neighbors gathered, drawn by the commotion, the tension. Folks who'd suffered in silence too long. They watched as Harlan shouted, pointing at Eli, branding him a thief, a liar, a man harboring fugitives. Holt flashed his badge, claiming the law backed him. But Eli's voice cut through, steady and sure. You all know the truth. You've seen the scars. You know what kind of men these are. The law ain't a badge, it's justice. And justice has been gone from this town too long. The crowd murmured, the tide turning. Clara stepped forward, pulling Emma with her. Her voice trembled, but held firm. We ain't the only ones they've hurt. We're just the ones still here. That was enough. The people found their courage, one voice at a time. Harlan's power crumbled under the weight of truth. Holt's smirk faded as those he'd once cowed closed in, demanding real justice. By day's end, Harlan and Vance were bound, marched off to face judgment beyond the town they'd once ruled. Holt, stripped of his badge, left to answer for his corruption. As the dust settled, Eli lowered his rifle, his chest heavy, but his eyes lighter than they'd been in years. Clara stood beside him, her hand brushing his, a quiet vow of something new, not just survival, but hope. And here's the heart of it, friends. One man may grow old, may bear scars, may think his best days are gone, but when he chooses to stand, when he chooses what's right, he can change everything. Courage ain't about being fearless. It's about acting despite the fear. So let me ask you, if you were Eli, would you have turned away, or would you have stood tall? If you were Clara, would you have found the voice to speak when silence felt safer? These questions linger long after the tale ends. If this story stirred you, if you believe tales like this deserve to be told, hit that like button and subscribe to follow every new chapter we share. Drop a comment with your thoughts. What would you have done in Eli's boots? Because the frontier may be gone, but its lessons still burn bright.